She stood outside the CEO's office, clutching a worn envelope that held her termination letter. 19-year-old Aisha Monroe had scrubbed floors, worked double shifts, and sacrificed everything to keep her daughter fed. Now, after one mistake, she was about to lose it all. But when the young millionaire CEO opened her employee file, he found something that would change both their lives forever. A secret so powerful it would expose the truth about loyalty, sacrifice, and the hidden cost of survival. What he discovered in those pages wasn't just her work history. It was a story of impossible choices, silent suffering, and a mother's unbreakable love, and it would force him to question everything he thought he knew about the people who built his empire. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. when Aisha Monroe wrung out her mop for what felt like the 100th time that night. Her hands, raw and cracked from industrial cleaning chemicals, trembled as she moved the bucket down the gleaming hallway of Platinum Enterprises. At 19 years old, she looked older, not in her face, which still held the soft roundness of youth, but in her eyes. Those eyes had seen too much, carried too much, sacrificed too much. Her daughter, 3-year-old Maya, was asleep at her neighbor Mrs. Patterson's apartment 3 blocks away. Aisha had exactly 13 minutes to finish this floor. Clock out, run to the all-night convenience store for milk and bread, pick up Maya, and get home before Mrs. Patterson's arthritis medication wore off and she needed to sleep. 13 minutes. Every night was a race against time, against exhaustion, against the crushing weight of being both mother and father, provider and protector. The custodial supervisor, Mr. Cajun Hendricks, had already written her up twice this month. Once for arriving 6 minutes late when Maya's daycare called about a fever, once for taking an extra bathroom break when her body, pushed beyond its limits, simply demanded rest. One more write-up, and she would be terminated. No severance. No second chances. Just gone. Aisha pushed the thoughts away and focused on her work. The marble floors of Platinum Enterprises reflected the city lights from the floor-to-ceiling windows. This building represented everything she wasn't: wealth, power, security, opportunity. By day, executives in tailored suits walked these halls discussing million-dollar deals. By night, invisible workers like Aisha erased every trace of their presence, ghosts maintaining the illusion of effortless success. She had been working here for 8 months, ever since losing her previous job at the diner when the owner sold the business. Before that, she had worked at a grocery store until they cut her hours. Before that, she had tried to finish high school while pregnant, but that dream died the day Maya was born and reality set in. There was no fairy godmother coming. No rescue, just survival, one brutal day at a time. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Baby is fine, take your time." Alicia's eyes stung with grateful tears. Mrs. Eyes stung with grateful tears. Patterson was 72, living on a fixed income, yet she never accepted payment for watching Maya. "We help each other," she would say in her warm, creaky voice. "That's what neighbors do." But Aisha knew she was taking advantage of kindness she could never repay. She knew Mrs. Patterson's own children rarely visited, that she was lonely, that caring for Maya gave her purpose. Still, the guilt gnawed at her. Everything felt like borrowing against a debt she would never be able to settle. As she rounded the corner to the executive wing, Aisha's heart sank. Coffee stains marked the cream carpet outside the CEO's office. Fresh coffee stains, still wet, spreading across the expensive fabric. Her hands shook as she retrieved the carpet cleaner from her cart. This was bad. Very bad. The CEO, some young millionaire named David Chen, was known to arrive before dawn. If he saw these stains, if he complained to facilities management, if Mr. Hendricks found out she had missed a spot in his precious executive wing, she scrubbed furiously, watching the clock. 11:52 p.m. The stains were stubborn, the coffee having already begun to set. Her shoulders burned, her knees ached from kneeling on the hard floor. But slowly, gradually, the carpet began to lighten. She was so focused on the task that she didn't hear the elevator doors open at the far end of the hall. Working late? Alicia's head snapped up. A young Asian man stood 15 feet away, wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, holding a leather bag. He looked tired, maybe 28 or 29, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. She scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking over the cleaning solution. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know anyone was still here. I'll be done in just a moment." "No rush," he said gently, walking closer. "Looks like someone made a mess. Sorry about that, probably one of our team." Aisha kept her eyes down, scrubbing harder. Important people didn't usually talk to custodial staff. They didn't even see them. This man was probably a senior executive working late on some critical project. She needed to be invisible, efficient, forgettable. "You're doing a great job," the man said. "These floors always look perfect in the morning. You're part of the night crew." "Yes, sir." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm almost finished with this section." He studied her for a moment, and Alicia felt uncomfortably visible under his gaze. Then he smiled, a genuine, warm smile, and nodded. "Well, thank you for everything you do. This place wouldn't run without people like you." He walked past her toward the CEO's office, and Aisha realized with a flash of panic that he probably worked directly for the young CEO, which meant he had the power to complain about her, to report that she had been slow, that the carpet had been stained on her watch. She scrubbed faster, desperate to erase every trace of imperfection before anyone else noticed. By the time she finished and carefully backed away to inspect her work, the hallway was empty. The man had disappeared into the CEO's office and closed the door. Aisha checked the clock, 11:58 p.m. She had 2 minutes to get her cart to the supply room, clock out, and begin the sprint to the convenience store. She didn't know that the kind man in the hallway was David Chen himself, the 28-year-old CEO who had built Platinum Enterprises from nothing. She didn't know that he had noticed the name on her uniform badge, or that her face, exhausted, determined, impossibly young, had reminded him of his own mother 20 years ago, working 3 jobs to keep him fed. And she certainly didn't know that in exactly 14 hours Mr. Dill Hendricks would place a termination letter on her supervisor's desk, or that David Chen would intercept it before she was called into the office. All she knew was that Maya needed milk for breakfast, and she was running out of time. Alicia grabbed her cart and ran. The next morning arrived too quickly. Aisha had slept for exactly 3 hours and 42 minutes before Maya woke up crying. Even in the dim pre-dawn light filtering through their apartment's thin curtains, Aisha could see that her daughter's cheeks were flushed bright red. "Mama, I don't feel good," Maya whimpered, her small voice cracking with fever. Aisha's heart plummeted. She pressed her lips to Maya's forehead, burning hot. She grabbed the cheap thermometer from the bathroom cabinet, her hands shaking as she waited for the reading. 102.3 degrees. Too high. Way too high. The decision tree in her mind began its cruel calculation. Call in sick to work. Risk termination. Go to work and leave Maya with Mrs. Patterson. Risk her daughter's health. Take Maya to the emergency room. Risk medical bills she couldn't pay. Try to bring the fever down at home. Risk it getting worse. Every path led to disaster. Every choice felt like choosing which piece of her life to sacrifice. She gave Maya children's fever reducer, the last in the bottle, and rocked her gently while the medication took effect. By 6 a.m., the fever had dropped to 100.8. Not great, but better. Aisha made her decision. She would take Maya to Mrs. Patterson, go to work for half her shift, then leave early to take her daughter to the urgent care clinic. It would cost her a write-up, but she would still have her job. Barely. Mrs. Patterson answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at Maya's flushed face, and immediately began fussing over her. "Poor baby. Don't you worry, Aisha. I'll keep her cool and comfortable. You go do what you need to do. I'll be back by lunch," Aisha promised, hating herself for leaving. "I just need to work half a shift. If her fever goes up, you call me immediately." "I've raised 4 children and 6 grandchildren," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "I know what to do. Now go, before you're late." Aisha ran to the bus stop, made it to Platinum Enterprises by 7:15 a.m., and changed into her uniform in the employee locker room. Her day shift responsibilities were different from the night crew. She was assigned to the employee cafeteria, wiping tables, emptying trash, keeping the coffee station stocked. It was mindless work which gave her too much time to worry about Maya. At 9:30 a.m., Mr. Hendricks appeared in the cafeteria doorway. His face was set in its usual expression of sour disapproval. "Monroe, my office, now." Alicia's stomach dropped. She followed him through the service corridors to the small, windowless office that smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork. He gestured to a chair and she sat, gripping her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I've received a complaint," Mr. Hendricks began, shuffling papers on his desk, "about the executive wing last night. Coffee stains on the carpet outside the CEO's office. Apparently not clean to standard." "But I cleaned them," Aisha said, her voice rising in panic. "I spent extra time making sure they were completely gone. I checked before I left. The CEO himself reported the stains this morning," Mr. Hendricks interrupted, said the carpet looked spotty and unprofessional. "That's your section, Monroe. Your responsibility." Aisha felt the walls closing in. The kind man in the hallway last night, that must have been someone who worked for the CEO, who had reported back to him, or maybe she had missed a spot in her exhaustion. Either way, it didn't matter. This was her third write-up. "I understand if you need to discipline me," Aisha said carefully, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But please, Mr. Hendricks, I need this job. I'm a single mother. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I'll work extra shifts. I'll redo any section you want." "This isn't about extra shifts, Mr. Darrell," Hendricks said, and there was something in his tone that made Aisha's blood run cold. "This is about patterns of behavior. Late arrivals, extended breaks, now substandard work. Company policy is clear. 3 write-ups in a 90-day period results in immediate termination." The word hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Termination. Alicia couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she could see was Maya's flushed face, Mrs. Patterson's worried eyes, the empty refrigerator at home, the stack of past-due bills on the kitchen counter. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I'll do better. I promise." Mr. Hendricks stood up, avoiding her eyes. "I don't make the rules, Monroe. I just enforce them. You'll receive your final paycheck at the end of the week. I need your badge and uniform by end of day today." Aisha sat frozen in the chair as he left the office. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the building, phones were ringing, people were laughing, the machinery of success was grinding forward, and she was being crushed beneath it. Her phone buzzed. "Mrs. Patterson. Honey, Maya's fever is back up to 103. I think you need to come get her and take her to a doctor." Alicia closed her eyes. She had no job. She had no health insurance. She had $53 in her checking account and a daughter who needed medical care. The breaking point she had been outrunning for so long had finally caught up with her. She stood on shaking legs, walked to her locker, and began removing her uniform. Through the small window in the locker room door, she could see office workers streaming past, confident, secure, oblivious. She had been invisible to them when she was employed. Now she wouldn't even be that. As she was gathering her few personal items, a photo of Maya, a worn paperback book, a package of crackers, the locker room door opened. A young woman in an expensive suit walked in, talking rapidly on her phone. She barely glanced at Aisha as she ended her call. "Excuse me," the woman said, not unkindly. "Could you tell me where the women's restroom is on this floor? I'm new to the building." Aisha stared at her. The woman saw the uniform in her hands, the tears on her face, and her expression softened. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I just lost my job," Alicia heard herself say, "and my daughter is sick, and I don't know what I'm going to do." The woman's face filled with sympathy. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Listen, I work in HR for a nonprofit organization. We help single mothers get back on their feet. I know it doesn't help right now, but call this number. They have emergency assistance programs, job placement services, even help with childcare. Don't give up, okay? You're stronger than you know." Aisha took the card with numb fingers. The woman squeezed her shoulder and left. Aisha looked down at the card. New Beginnings Initiative. A phone number. A tiny seed of hope in the midst of devastation. But right now, Maya needed her. Everything else would have to wait. She left Platinum Enterprises to the service entrance, never looking back at the gleaming building that had promised stability and delivered only heartbreak. She didn't know that at that exact moment, David Chen was reading her employee file in his office, his face growing darker with every page. She didn't know that Mr. Hendricks had just received a call from the CEO's office requesting his immediate presence on the executive floor. All she knew was that she had to get to Maya, Everything else was noise. David Chen had built Platinum Enterprises on a simple philosophy: treat people with respect, and they will give you their best. He had learned this from his mother, who had worked as a seamstress, a house cleaner, and a restaurant dishwasher, to put him through school. She had endured endless indignities from employers who saw her as disposable, interchangeable, beneath notice. When David made his first million at 24, he had promised himself that his company would be different. But as he sat in his office that Tuesday morning, reading through the employee file of Aisha Monroe, he realized how thoroughly he had failed to keep that promise. The file told a story that made his chest ache with anger and shame. Alicia Monroe, age 19, hired 8 months ago, perfect attendance for the first 6 months until a series of incidents began appearing in her record. The notes from Mr. Hendricks painted her as negligent and unreliable, but David read between the lines, and what he saw was a young mother fighting an impossible battle against a system designed to grind her down. First write-up: employee arrived 6 minutes late to shift. Claimed child was sick in daycare, called with emergency. Unacceptable excuse. Time is money. David's jaw tightened. 6 minutes for a sick child. Second write-up: employee took unauthorized 8-minute bathroom break during shift. When questioned, became emotional and claimed she wasn't feeling well. Warned about proper break procedures. David thought of his own mother, who had once fainted at work from exhaustion and been threatened with termination for the disruption. Third write-up, submitted just that morning: employee failed to adequately clean coffee stains in executive wing. CEO reported substandard work. This represents a pattern of declining performance. Recommend immediate termination. David's hands shook as he read those words. He had never reported any such thing. In fact, when he had arrived at his office that morning, the carpet had been spotless. He had specifically noticed because he remembered seeing the young custodian working on those stains the night before, her exhausted face illuminated by the harsh hallway lights. Someone was lying, and David had a sinking suspicion who. He pulled up the building security camera footage from the previous night. There, at 11:43 p.m., was Aisha Monroe on her knees, scrubbing the carpet with fierce determination. David fast-forwarded. At 11:56 p.m., she stood, inspected her work, and nodded with satisfaction. The carpet was clean, perfectly clean. David's face darkened. He switched to the morning footage. At 7:35 a.m., Mr. Hendricks had walked through the executive wing with his tablet, photographing various areas. But there was something off about his movements. David zoomed in and watched as Hendricks deliberately poured coffee from his thermos onto the carpet outside David's office, then photographed the stains. Fabricated evidence. A setup. But why? David dug deeper into the files, cross-referencing termination records. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Hendricks had terminated 43 employees from the custodial staff. That was more than double the termination rate of any other department supervisor in the company. David began pulling the individual files, and a sickening pattern emerged. Most of the terminated employees were women. Most were minorities. Most had been written up for minor infractions, a few minutes late, slightly extended breaks, subjective complaints about work quality. And in almost every case, the third write-up that triggered termination seemed excessive, even suspicious. David felt sick. He had been so focused on growing the business, on securing new contracts and expanding into new markets, that he had neglected the foundation his mother had taught him to build on, taking care of the people who did the hardest work for the lowest pay. He had hired HR professionals and middle managers and assumed they shared his values. He had been naive, and people like Aisha Monroe had paid the price. His phone buzzed. His assistant, Jennifer. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Hendricks is here for his 11 a.m. meeting." "Send him in," David said quietly. He closed the employee files and folded his hands on his desk, working to control the anger burning in his chest. "Mr. Reiter." Hendricks entered with his usual self-important stride, carrying a tablet and a folder. "Good morning, Mr. Chen. I have the quarterly facilities report ready for your review, and I wanted to discuss some upcoming equipment purchases." "Sit down, Dennis," David interrupted. His voice was calm, but something in his tone made Hendricks pause. He sat. "I want to talk about Aisha Monroe," David continued, "the custodial worker you terminated this morning." Hendricks shifted in his chair. "Ah, yes. Unfortunate situation, but necessary. She had 3 write-ups in the 90-day period. Company policy was clear. "Tell me about the coffee stains," David said. "The ones you reported I complained about." "Well, they were quite noticeable this morning," Hendricks said smoothly. "Spotted and uneven. I photographed them for documentation before having them re-cleaned. The evidence is in my report." "I saw your evidence," David said. "I also saw the security footage of you pouring that coffee on the carpet yourself at 7:35 this morning." The color drained from Hendricks' face. That's not. There must be some mistake with the footage." "There's no mistake," David said, his voice hard. "I watched you fabricate evidence to justify terminating a 19-year-old single mother. What I want to know is why. And I want to know how many other employees you've done this to." Hendricks' mouth opened and closed, sweat beaded on his forehead. "Mr. Chen, I can't explain. The custodial staff, they're always causing problems, always asking for accommodations, special schedules, time off. It's easier to maintain efficiency if you cycle through workers who understand that this is a job, not a charity." "Get out," David said quietly. "Excuse me, get out of my building," David said, standing. "You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and if you ever set foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. You'll receive notification from our legal department about the investigation into your conduct. If we find evidence of fraud or discrimination, we will pursue charges." Hendricks stood, his face purple with rage. "You can't do this. I've worked here for 5 years. I have contracts, I have rights, and Aisha Monroe had the right not to be subjected to fabricated write-ups and discriminatory termination." David shot back. "Get out before I call security." Hendricks grabbed his tablet and stormed out. David stood at the window, looking down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Alicia Monroe was probably trying to figure out how to feed her daughter, how to pay her rent, how to survive the catastrophe he had allowed to happen on his watch. He picked up his phone and called HR. "This is David Chen. I need you to locate Aisha Monroe immediately. She was terminated this morning from custodial services. I need her home address and phone number, and I need a car and driver ready in 15 minutes. This is priority 1. "Yes, sir," came the crisp reply. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "We're about to do something this company should have done a long time ago," David said. "We're going to make this right." He had no idea if Aisha would even speak to him. He had no idea if he could undo the damage that had been done. But he knew he had to try. Because this wasn't just about one employee. This was about the promise he had made to his mother, to himself, and to every person who walked through his doors believing that hard work and dignity still mattered in this world. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. The file on Aisha Monroe was still open on his desk, and one detail kept echoing in his mind. She was 19, exactly the age his mother had been when she arrived in America, with nothing but hope and the willingness to work herself to the bone for a better life. This time, David thought fiercely, the story would have a different ending. The urgent care clinic had cost $147 that Aisha didn't have. Maya had a respiratory infection that required antibiotics, another $63 at the pharmacy. By the time they returned to the apartment at 3 p.m., Aisha had $12 left in her checking account, and no idea how she would pay rent in 9 days. Maya was finally sleeping, curled up on the sagging couch with her worn stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. The antibiotics were already working. Her fever had dropped, and her breathing was easier. At least Aisha had done that right. At least her daughter was safe and getting better. Aisha sat at the tiny kitchen table and spread out her bills. Rent, $850, due on the 1st. Electricity, $73, past due. Phone, $45, due in 3 days. She picked up the business card the woman at Platinum Enterprises had given her. New Beginnings Initiative. Emergency assistance for single mothers. Pride warred with desperation. Aisha had never asked for handouts. She had always worked for everything she had, even when what she had was almost nothing. But Maya needed to eat. The electricity needed to stay on. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was reaching for her phone when someone knocked on the apartment door. Aisha froze. Landlords didn't usually come by without calling first. Bill collectors couldn't get through the building's security door. Mrs. Patterson had her own key and always called before coming over. Aisha approached the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. A young Asian man in expensive but casual clothes stood in the hallway, holding a leather folder. Behind him, barely visible, was another man in a suit, probably security or a driver. Aisha's heart began to race. This looked like trouble. Official trouble. She cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you, Ms. Monroe?" "Alicia Monroe." The young man's voice was gentle, almost apologetic. "My name is David Chen. I'm the CEO of Platinum Enterprises. I know this is unexpected, but I need to speak with you about what happened this morning. May I come in?" Alicia stared at him in shock. The CEO, the millionaire who ran the company from the executive wing she had cleaned every night. What could he possibly want with her? Had Mr. Hendricks filed some kind of charge against her? Was she being accused of theft or— "You're not in trouble," David said quickly, reading the panic on her face. "I promise, I'm here because a terrible mistake was made, and I need to make it right. Please, just 5 minutes of your time." Against every instinct screaming at her to slam the door and hide, Alicia slowly unhooked the chain and opened the door. David stepped inside, his driver remaining in the hallway. He glanced around the small apartment, the shabby furniture, the peeling paint, the toys scattered on the floor, Maya sleeping on the couch, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity exactly, recognition. "Thank you for seeing me," David said quietly. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to know that what happened to you this morning was wrong. Mr. Hendricks fabricated evidence against you. He lied about my reporting substandard work. I reviewed the security footage. You did an excellent job cleaning those stains. You did nothing wrong." Aisha felt her knees go weak. She grabbed the back of a chair for support. "I don't understand. Why would he lie?" "Because he's been doing it for years," David said, anger creeping into his voice. "Targeting vulnerable employees, creating impossible standards, manufacturing reasons to terminate them. I had no idea it was happening. That's my failure, and I take full responsibility. But I'm here to tell you that as of this morning, Dennis Hendricks no longer works for Platinum Enterprises, and I want to offer you your job back, with an apology and full back pay for the day you lost." Alicia's mind spun. Her job back, money to pay the bills, security for Maya, but something didn't make sense. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you care what happens to someone like me?" David's expression softened. "May I sit down?" Aisha nodded numbly, and they both sat at the small kitchen table. Maya stirred on the couch, but didn't wake. "When I was 7 years old," David began, "my mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She cleaned houses during the day, worked as a seamstress in the evening, and washed dishes at an all-night diner on weekends. I barely saw her. When I did, she was so exhausted she could hardly speak, but she never complained. She never stopped working. She never stopped believing that if she just were taught enough, we would be okay." His voice caught, and he paused. "One day, she fainted at the restaurant. Exhaustion, dehydration, stress. They fired her for it, said she was unreliable. That was the day I promised myself that if I ever had the power to change how workers were treated, I would. When I built my company, I thought I had built it on those values, but I was wrong. I let people like Hendricks slip through. I let the distance between the executive floor and the service corridors grow too wide. I forgot to look down, and people like you suffered because of my negligence." Aisha felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Your mother, did things get better for her?" "Eventually," David said with a sad smile. "I got scholarships, built a tech startup in college, sold it for enough money to take care of her. She never had to work again. But those years, they took something from her. A light went out that never quite came back. I see that same exhaustion in your eyes, Alicia, and I refuse to let another young mother be crushed by a system that should be lifting her up instead." "I'm only 19, Aisha said, her voice breaking. "I had Maya when I was 16. Everyone said I was stupid, that I ruined my life. Maybe they were right." "They weren't right," David said firmly. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You work all night. You care for your daughter. You fight every single day against impossible odds. That's not weakness. That's heroism. Maya stirred on the couch and opened her eyes. "Mama," she called out in her small, hoarse voice. Aisha went to her immediately, scooping her up and checking her forehead. Still warm, but better. Maya looked at David with curious eyes. "Who's that?" she asked. "That's Mr. Chen, baby. He's a friend." David stood, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hello, Maya. Your mama tells me you haven't been feeling well. Are you feeling better now?" Maya nodded shyly, burying her face in Aisha's shoulder. David smiled, and something about the genuine warmth in that smile made Aisha's defensive walls begin to crack. "Ms. Monroe," David said, "I know this is a lot to process, but I want to offer you more than just your custodial position back. I've been reviewing our employee development programs, and I think you would be an excellent candidate for our scholarship initiative. We partner with local community colleges to help employees finish their education while working flexible schedules. Full tuition, books, and a modest living stipend. You could finish high school, get your GED, and even pursue a degree if you wanted." Aisha stared at him. "Why would you do that? What's in it for you?" "Honestly, a clear conscience," David said, "and a better company. The best businesses invest in their people. I should have been doing this all along. You're not charity, Alicia. You're an investment I'd be stupid not to make." "I don't know what to say," Alicia whispered. "Say you'll think about it," David said gently. "Take the rest of the week off. Paid. Take care of your daughter. Look at the materials I'm going to have HR send you about the scholarship program. And when you're ready, call my office. My personal line will be in the packet. No pressure, no tricks, just an opportunity." He pulled a check from his leather folder and placed it on the table. "This is compensation for the wrongful termination and the distress it caused. It's also an apology. Money doesn't fix what happened, but I hope it gives you some breathing room to make decisions that are right for you and Maya." Alicia looked at the check. $5,000. Her vision blurred with tears. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. "I can't accept this," she said automatically. "You can, and you should," David said firmly. "You earned it by enduring treatment you should never have faced. Please, let me do this one thing right." Before Aisha could respond, Maya coughed a deep, rattling cough that made Aisha wince. David heard it too. "Has she seen a doctor?" he asked. "This afternoon. Respiratory infection. She's on antibiotics." "Good." David nodded, then hesitated. "If you need anything, and I mean anything for her care, you call me. Medical bills, medication, whatever. That's not part of any employment package. That's just one parent to another, understanding that our children come first." Something broke open in Aisha's chest. This stranger, this millionaire CEO saw her. Really saw her. Not as a problem to be managed or a statistic to be processed, but as a human being fighting to protect the person she loved most in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." David smiled. "Thank you for giving me the chance to remember what matters. My mother always said that how we treat people when they're powerless tells us who we really are. I lost sight of that. You reminded me." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. I'm implementing major changes to our HR policies and oversight systems. I'd like your input if you're willing. You've seen the problems from the inside. You know it needs to change. Your voice matters, Aisha. I hope you'll trust me enough to share it." After he left, Aisha sat at the kitchen table, holding the check with shaking hands. Maya climbed into her lap, her small, warm body a comforting weight. "Mama, why are you crying?" Maya asked. "Because sometimes," Aisha said, kissing her daughter's forehead, "good things happen, and it's okay to cry when they do." She looked at the business card for New Beginnings Initiative, then at the check from David Chen, then at her beautiful daughter. For the first time in years, the crushing weight on her chest lifted slightly. The future was still uncertain. The path forward was still difficult. But she wasn't alone anymore, and that changed everything. 3 months later, Alicia sat in a brightly lit classroom at Riverside Community College, her notebook open, her mind racing to keep up with the instructor's words. She was enrolled in a GED preparation program, attending classes 3 mornings a week while Maya was at the subsidized daycare center that Platinum Enterprises helped fund for employee families. The scholarship David had offered had been real. The support system he promised had materialized. Aisha had returned to work not as a custodial worker, but as an administrative assistant in the facilities department day shift. Better pay, opportunities to learn office management skills. Mr. Hendricks's replacement, a kind woman named Patricia Rodriguez, had taken a personal interest in mentoring her. But the road hadn't been easy. There'd been moments of crushing self-doubt, nights when the homework seemed impossible, days when Maya's needs and Aisha's responsibilities collided in exhausting ways. More than once, Aisha had been tempted to quit, to retreat back to the familiar territory of just surviving rather than risking failure by trying to build something better. What kept her going was a promise she had made to Maya and to herself. No more merely surviving. They were going to build a life worth living. Ms. Maya Monroe? The instructor's voice broke through her thoughts. Can you solve the equation on the board? Aisha stood, walked to the whiteboard, and carefully worked through the algebra problem. Mathematics had always been difficult for her, but she was learning that difficulty didn't mean impossible. It just meant she had to work harder, ask more questions, and refuse to give up. She finished the equation and turned to face the class. The instructor smiled. Perfect. Well done. As Alicia returned to her seat, she caught the eye of another student, a woman in her 30s, who had smiled at her on the first day of class. You're really good at this, the woman whispered. I'm still struggling. I can help you during break, Aisha offered. It's easier than it looks once you understand the pattern. After class, Aisha checked her phone. A text from Patricia. Great news. David wants to meet with you this afternoon at 3 p.m. Can you make it? Alicia's heart skipped. She had seen David a few times since that day in her apartment brief encounters in the office, always cordial, always respectful. But this sounded official. She texted back, I'll be there. At 2:55 p.m., Aisha stood outside David's office, smoothing down the simple but professional dress she had purchased from a thrift store. His assistant, Jennifer, smiled warmly at her. Go right in. He's expecting you. David stood as she entered, gesturing to the comfortable chairs by the window rather than the formal desk setup. Aisha, thank you for coming. How are classes going? Good, Aisha said, settling into the chair. Challenging, but good. I'm learning a lot. Patricia tells me you're excelling in everything, David said. Top marks in your GED prep courses, consistently strong performance at work, and apparently you've been helping other employees navigate the new development program we implemented. That's remarkable, especially given everything else you're juggling. Aisha felt her cheeks warm. I'm just trying to make the most of the opportunity you gave me. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, David said, leaning forward. Opportunities. I've been working with our board to create a new initiative, a mentorship and leadership development track specifically for employees who show exceptional potential but might not have traditional qualifications. We want to identify people who have the drive, the character, and the resilience to grow into leadership positions within the company. And Alicia, you're exactly the kind of person we built this program for. Aisha's breath caught. I don't understand. I'm still getting my GED. I don't have any degree, any experience. You have something more valuable than credentials, David interrupted gently. You have perspective. You understand what it's like to be invisible in this company, to work hard and feel like nobody sees you. You know where the systems fail, where the gaps exist, where people slip through the cracks. That knowledge is invaluable. And combined with your natural intelligence and work ethic, I think you could become a powerful voice for change here. What would this program involve? Alicia asked carefully. Accelerated education. We'd pay for you to complete your GED and then enroll in a business management program, mentorship from senior leaders, rotations through different departments so you can learn how the whole company operates, and most importantly, a seat at the table when we make decisions about employee welfare and development. I don't want to just fix the problems we have now. I want to build systems that prevent those problems from happening in the first place. And I can't do that without voices like yours. Aisha sat back, overwhelmed. A few months ago, she had been scrubbing floors at midnight, counting her last few dollars, wondering how she would feed her daughter. Now she was being offered a path to real influence, real power to change things. Why me? She asked quietly. There must be other people more qualified. David smiled. Do you remember the first night we met, when I walked through and saw you cleaning those coffee stains? Aisha nodded. I saw something in you that night, David said. Determination, pride in your work, even when nobody was watching. You could have half-assed those stains, knowing your shift was almost over, knowing nobody would probably notice. But you didn't. You got down on your knees and scrubbed until that carpet was perfect. That tells me who you are. And who you are is exactly who this company needs. I'm scared, Alicia admitted. What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough or strong enough? Then you'll learn and try again, David said firmly. That's what growth looks like. My mother used to tell me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and doing the thing anyway. You've already shown more courage than most people ever will. This is just the next step. Aisha thought of Maya, who was thriving in daycare, making friends, learning her letters and numbers. She thought of the bills that were now paid on time, the food in the refrigerator, the growing sense that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. She thought of the other young mothers like her, still scrubbing floors, still invisible, still one right up away from disaster. If I do this, Aisha said slowly, I want to make sure it helps other people too, not just me. I want to be part of changing things so nobody else has to go through what I went through. That's exactly the point, David said. Individual success is good. Systemic change is better. I want to build both. Aisha took a deep breath. Then yes, I'm in. I'll do it. David's smile was radiant. I was hoping you'd say that. Welcome to the leadership track, Alicia. I think you're going to do extraordinary things. As Aisha left David's office, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass wall, a young woman in a professional dress, carrying a notebook full of ideas, walking with her head held high. She barely recognized herself. The scared, exhausted girl who had stood in Mr. Hendricks's office 3 months ago, begging for her job, felt like a different person. But she wasn't different. She was just finally becoming who she had always had the potential to be. And with the right support, the right opportunities, and the right people believing in her, there was no limit to how far she could go. That evening, Aisha picked up Maya from daycare and took her to the park. As her daughter played on the swings, laughing with pure joy, Aisha pulled out her phone and called Mrs. Patterson. Hello, honey, came the warm, familiar voice. Mrs. Patterson, I have some news, Alicia said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. And I want you to be the first to know after Maya. I got accepted into a leadership development program. They're going to help me finish school and learn business management. I'm going to be able to build a real career. There was a pause, and then Aisha heard Mrs. Patterson crying softly. Oh, baby, I always knew you were special. I always knew you were going to do great things. Your mama would be so proud of you. Aisha's mother had died when she was 15, leaving her alone and pregnant with nowhere to turn. For so long, Aisha had carried the shame of that, the belief that she had somehow failed her mother's memory by becoming a teenage parent. But now, standing in the golden afternoon light, watching her daughter play, she felt something shift. Maybe her mother would be proud, not because Alicia had avoided mistakes, but because she had faced them with courage, not because the road had been easy, but because she had walked it anyway. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Patterson, Aisha said through tears, for taking care of Maya, for believing in us, for being there when nobody else was. I'm going to pay it forward, I promise you that. You already are, honey, Mrs. Patterson said softly. Every day you already are. That night, after Maya was asleep, Aisha sat at her kitchen table, the same table where David had placed that life-changing check 3 months ago, and wrote in a journal she had started keeping. Today I said yes to my future, she wrote. I don't know where this path leads. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I know I'm not alone anymore. I know people believe in me, and I know that Maya will grow up seeing her mother reach for dreams, not just scrape by. That matters. That changes everything. She closed the journal and looked around the small apartment. It was still shabby, still small, still far from perfect. But it was full of hope now. And hope, Aisha was learning, was the most powerful force in the world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But for tonight, Alicia allowed herself to simply feel grateful. Grateful for second chances, grateful for people like David who use their power to lift others up. Grateful for her daughter, sleeping peacefully in the next room, dreaming whatever beautiful dreams 3-year-olds dream. The breaking point she had reached 3 months ago hadn't destroyed her, it had transformed her. And that transformation was only beginning. 8 months after that first meeting in David's office, Aisha stood in front of Platinum Enterprises' board of directors, about to give the most important presentation of her life. She had her GED now, was enrolled in business management courses at Riverside Community College, and had spent the past months rotating to different departments, learning how the company operated from every angle. But today wasn't about her education or her progress. Today was about changing the system that had nearly destroyed her and countless others. The boardroom was intimidating, all glass and steel, with a massive table where 12 executives sat watching her with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. David sat at the head of the table, giving her an encouraging nod. Next to him was Patricia Rodriguez, whose mentorship had been invaluable in preparing Aisha for this moment. "Good afternoon," Aisha began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My name is Aisha Monroe, and 8 months ago I was terminated from my custodial position in this company based on fabricated evidence and discriminatory management practices. Today, I'm here as a participant in the Leadership Development Program, and I want to share research findings that I believe could transform how we treat our most vulnerable employees." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. It showed a chart of employee turnover rates across different departments. Over the past 3 years, custodial and service staff turnover was 73%. That's nearly 3 times higher than any other department. When we investigated the reasons, we found a pattern. Employees weren't leaving because they wanted to. They were being pushed out by inflexible policies that failed to account for the realities of their lives. Click. Next slide. Single parents make up 42% of our custodial staff. Of those, 89% have no family support system and rely on patchwork childcare arrangements. When a child gets sick, when daycare falls through, when a school emergency happens, these employees face an impossible choice: abandon their child or risk their job. Our current attendance policy treats all absences equally, regardless of cause. This punishes people for circumstances beyond their control. One board member, a stern-looking man in his 60s, raised his hand. "Ms. Monroe, aren't you suggesting we simply excuse poor attendance? How does a business function if employees can't be relied upon to show up?" Aisha had anticipated this question. "I'm not suggesting we excuse poor attendance. I'm suggesting we distinguish between voluntary and involuntary absences and create support systems that address root causes rather than just punishing symptoms. For example, if we partnered with local childcare providers to offer emergency backup care, single parents could still come to work even when their regular arrangements fall through. If we offered flexible shift swapping through an app, employees could cover each other's emergencies without impacting operations. These solutions cost money up front, but they save money long-term by reducing turnover and training costs. She clicked to the next slide, showing a cost-benefit analysis that she had worked on with Patricia and the finance team. It costs approximately $4,200 to recruit, hire, and train a new custodial worker. With 73% turnover, we spent $892,000 annually just on replacement costs for that department. If we implemented comprehensive support policies and reduced turnover by even 50%, we'd save $446,000 per year. And that doesn't account for the value of institutional knowledge, improved morale, or reduced management overhead. David leaned forward, clearly pleased. "What specific policies are you recommending?" Aisha took a breath. This was the crucial part. First, a tiered absence policy that distinguishes between documented emergencies and unexcused absences. Second, partnerships with childcare providers to offer subsidized emergency care. Third, a shift swap app that empowers employees to manage their own schedules while ensuring coverage. Fourth, access to interest-free emergency loans for employees facing financial crises that might otherwise force them to miss work. And fifth, mandatory bias training for all supervisors. with regular audits of discipline and termination decisions to catch discriminatory patterns before they escalate. Another board member spoke up, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "This all sounds wonderful in theory, Miss Monroe, but I'm concerned about implementation. How do we ensure these programs don't get abused?" "The same way we ensure any policy doesn't get abused," Aisha replied. "Clear guidelines, consistent oversight, and accountability. But I'd ask you to consider this right now. Our policies are being abused in the opposite direction. Supervisors have unchecked power to write up employees for minor infractions, to interpret policies in discriminatory ways, to create hostile environments that force people out. We're so worried about employees taking advantage that we've created a system where management can take advantage instead. The solution isn't to swing to the opposite extreme. It's to build genuine accountability on both sides." The room fell silent. Aisha could see some board members shifting uncomfortably. She had just implied that people in power had failed in their oversight. It was a risk, but it was also the truth. David broke the silence. "Aisha is right. The failure wasn't just Dennis Hendricks. It was our failure to create systems that would have caught his behavior years earlier. We built a company culture that valued efficiency over humanity, and vulnerable employees paid the price. That changes now." "I have one more thing to share," Alicia said quietly. "With permission from the employees involved, I've compiled testimonies from current and former staff about their experiences. I think it's important for this board to hear directly from the people most affected by our policies." She clicked to a slide that showed a quote. "I worked here for 2 years. I was a good employee. But when my mother had a stroke and I needed 3 days off to arrange her care, I was written up for excessive absence. I had no sick days left because I used them all when my son had pneumonia. I felt like the company saw me as a machine, not a person with a family and responsibilities. I quit because I couldn't work somewhere that treated me like I was disposable." Another slide, another testimony. "I'm a single father raising 2 kids. The overnight shift worked for my schedule because my mother could watch the kids while they slept. When my supervisor changed my hours without notice, I tried to explain the situation, but he said my personal life wasn't his problem. I had to choose between keeping my job and abandoning my children. That's not a choice any parent should have to make." Aisha looked around the table. Some of the executives were staring at their papers, unable to meet her eyes. Others looked genuinely moved. "These are our employees. These are the people who clean our offices, who prepare our food, who keep this building running. They deserve better than we've given them, and we have the power, the resources, and the moral obligation to do better." The stern board member who had questioned her earlier cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe, I owe you an apology. When you started speaking, I assumed this would be an emotional appeal without substance, but you've presented a well-researched, financially sound case for policy reform. More than that, you've reminded me why I got into business in the first place, to build something that matters, to create value not just for shareholders, but for everyone who contributes to our success. I support your recommendations." One by one, the other board members voiced their agreement. By the end of the meeting, Aisha's proposals had been unanimously approved for implementation, with a budget allocation and a timeline for rollout. As the executives filed out, congratulating her and shaking her hand, David approached with a smile that lit up his whole face. "That was extraordinary, Alicia. You didn't just present policies. You changed minds. That's leadership." Aisha felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I just told the truth. I told them what it's like to be invisible and afraid and desperate. They needed to hear it. They needed to hear it from you," David corrected, "because you lived it, you survived it, and now you're transforming it. I'm proud of you." Patricia joined them, beaming. "Girl, you were phenomenal. I've been in corporate environments for 20 years, and I've never seen a presentation that powerful. You have a gift for making people understand what they've been choosing not to see." "I had good teachers," Aisha said, looking between them. "And I had something most presenters don't have, personal stakes. This isn't theoretical to me. Every policy I proposed represents a moment when I was failed by the system. Every change I'm fighting for is about making sure no other young mother has to stand in a supervisor's office begging for her job, feeling like her humanity doesn't matter." David's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. "I hate to leave this moment, but I have a call I can't miss." Aisha, take the rest of the day off. Celebrate. You've earned it. He paused, then added, and start thinking about next steps, because after a performance like that, the board is going to want to know what other changes you think we need to make. Your voice just became one of the most important in this company. After David left, Patricia pulled Aisha aside. Can I give you some advice, mentor to mentee? Always, Aisha said. Don't let them put you in a box labeled employee advocate and nothing else, Patricia said seriously. What you did today was important, but you're capable of so much more. Learn finance, learn operations, learn strategic planning, become indispensable in multiple areas. So when you advocate for change, people can't dismiss you as a single-issue activist. They'll have to recognize you as a business leader who happens to care deeply about people. Aisha nodded slowly. That's smart. I don't want to be just the diversity hire with a sob story. I want to earn my place here through competence and results. You're already earning it, Patricia said warmly. But the business world has a way of limiting people, especially young women of color. They'll try to make you a symbol instead of a person. Don't let them. Be complex. Be multifaceted. Be excellent in ways that make it impossible to reduce you to a narrative. As Alicia rode the bus home that afternoon, she reflected on how far she had come. A year ago, she had been scrubbing floors, invisible and voiceless. Now she was shaping policy for a company that employed thousands of people. Her recommendations would affect real lives, create real opportunities, prevent real suffering. But Patricia's warning echoed in her mind. The danger wasn't just external people trying to limit her. The danger was also internal, limiting herself by accepting a narrow definition of what she could be or accomplish. She had fought so hard to be seen that she couldn't let that visibility become a cage. When she picked up Maya from daycare, her daughter ran to her with a drawing. "Mama, I made this for you. It's you giving a speech." Alicia looked at the stick-figure drawing, a woman standing in front of other people with a big smile on her face. "How did you know I gave a speech today, baby?" "Mrs. Mwana, Patricia told me when she dropped off my snack," Maya said proudly. "She said you were very brave and smart. Are you brave and smart, Mama?" Aisha knelt down and pulled her daughter into a hug. "I'm trying to be, sweetheart. Every day I'm trying to be." That night, after Maya was asleep, Aisha sat at her kitchen table and wrote in her journal, "Today I spoke truth to power, and power listened." But the real victory wasn't the policies that got approved. It was remembering who I'm doing this for. Not just Maya, not just myself, but every person who's been made to feel small, disposable, invisible. I can't save everyone, but I can change systems, and systems save people. That's worth fighting for. She closed the journal and looked at the business textbook sitting next to it, full of highlighted passages and sticky notes. Tomorrow, she would study finance. She would learn about profit margins and capital allocation and return on investment. She would become fluent in the language of power, so when she fought for change, she could speak in terms that resonated with decision-makers. The scared girl who had begged for her job was gone. In her place stood a young woman who understood that real change required both heart and strategy, both passion and competence. And she was just getting started. 2 years after that pivotal board presentation, Alicia stood in the newly renovated Employee Resource Center at Platinum Enterprises, watching as parents dropped their children off at the company's subsidized daycare facility. It was 6:30 a.m., and the center was already bustling with activity. Professional caregivers greeted each child by name, helping them settle into bright, cheerful rooms filled with educational toys and learning materials. This center had been Aisha's idea, her first major project after being promoted to Director of Employee Experience. It hadn't been easy to convince the finance team that spending $1.2 million on childcare infrastructure was sound business strategy. But the numbers didn't lie. Employee retention in lower-wage positions had improved by 68%. Absenteeism was down by 52%. Productivity was up across the board. And the company had been featured in several business publications as an example of progressive employment practices, which had helped with recruitment and brand reputation. More importantly, parents like the woman Aisha used to be now had one less impossible choice to make each day. Ms. Monroe, a young woman approached, holding a toddler on her hip. She looked nervous. I just wanted to say thank you. I heard you were the one who pushed for this daycare center. I'm a single mom, and before this, I was patching together babysitters and sometimes leaving my daughter with my neighbor who's too old to really watch her properly. This place, it's changed our lives. Aisha smiled, recognizing herself in the woman's tired eyes, her worn clothes, her desperate gratitude. What's your name? Teresa. Teresa Gonzalez. I work in housekeeping. How old is your daughter? 2. Her name's Sophia. Aisha knelt down to Sophia's level. Hi, Sophia. Are you excited to play with the other kids today? The little girl nodded shyly, hiding her face in her mother's shoulder. Teresa, Aisha said, standing back up, have you heard about our education assistance program? We help employees finish high school, get vocational training, even pursue college degrees if they want. You should talk to HR about it. Teresa's eyes widened. I don't know if I'd qualify. I dropped out of school in 10th grade, and my English isn't very good. That's exactly why the program exists, Aisha said firmly. Talk to HR. Tell them I sent you, and if you run into any problems, you come directly to me, okay? That's what I'm here for. After Teresa left, Alicia checked her watch. She had a meeting with David in 30 minutes to discuss the next phase of employee initiatives. But first, she wanted to stop by the custodial department. She found the team gathered for their morning briefing. The supervisor, James Washington, was a far cry from Dennis Hendricks. He was respectful, supportive, and genuinely invested in his team's well-being. When he saw Alicia, he smiled broadly. Ms. Monroe, what brings you down to our corner of the world? Just checking in, Aisha said, making sure the new scheduling app is working properly. It's amazing, one of the workers chimed in. Last week my kid had a school play and I was able to swap shifts with Carlos in like 2 minutes. Before I would have had to miss it or risk a write-up. That's exactly what we wanted, Aisha said. James, can I see the attendance and discipline reports from last quarter? They went to his small office and James pulled up the data on his computer. See for yourself. Attendance is up, turnover is down, and we haven't had a single termination in 6 months. Compared to the same quarter 2 years ago when we had 9 terminations, most of them questionable. Aisha studied the numbers, satisfaction warming her chest. These weren't just statistics, they were lives, families, people who now had stability and dignity. There's one thing I wanted to talk to you about, James said carefully. I've been reviewing the pay scale for custodial positions, and honestly, I think we're still undervaluing this work. The cost of living has gone up, but wages haven't kept pace. I'd like to propose a 15% across-the-board increase, plus performance bonuses for team members who show exceptional initiative. I know it's a big ask, but write up a formal proposal, Aisha interrupted. Include cost projections, comparisons to market rates, and retention data. I'll take it to David and the finance team. We've been talking about wage equity anyway. This might be the right time to make a move. James looked stunned. You'd support that? Even though it's going to cost the company significant money? The company can afford it, Aisha said simply, and it's the right thing to do. Besides, we've proven that investing in employees pays off in measurable ways. This is just the next step. At 9 a.m., Alicia met David in his office. He looked tired but energized, the way he always did when working on something he cared about. How's the daycare center rollout going? He asked immediately. Better than projected, Alicia reported. We're at 87% capacity, and we have a waiting list. I think we should start planning for expansion, maybe partner with other companies in the area to create a shared facility that serves multiple employers. David made notes on his tablet. I like that. Economies of scale, broader impact. What else? Aisha outlined James Washington's proposal for wage increases. She laid out the financial implications, the potential pushback from the board, and her recommendations for implementation. David listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he sat back and smiled. 2 years ago, you were scrubbing floors. Now you're proposing company-wide compensation reform and building multi-employer partnerships. Do you ever stop and think about how remarkable that is? Aisha shrugged. uncomfortable with the praise. I just remember what it felt like to be on the other side. Every policy I propose, I ask myself, would this have helped me when I was desperate? If the answer is yes, I fight for it. That's what makes you invaluable, David said. You haven't forgotten where you came from, but you learn to speak the language of where you are. That's a rare combination. He paused, then pulled out a folder from his desk. I have something to tell you, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. Aisha felt a flicker of anxiety. Okay, the board has approved a new position, Chief People Officer, someone who oversees not just HR, but all aspects of employee experience, culture, and development. It's a C-suite position, Aisha, and they want to offer it to you. Aisha's mouth fell open. What? David, I'm 21 years old. I don't even have my associate's degree yet. I can't, you can, David said firmly. The board reviewed your track record, the daycare center that came in under budget and exceeded projections, the policy reforms that reduced turnover by 2/3, the mentorship program that's become a model for other companies, the employee satisfaction scores that have gone from 43% to 84% in the department you've touched. Aisha, you've transformed this company in 2 years. Age doesn't matter. Formal credentials don't matter. Results matter, and your results speak for themselves. But what about people who've been here longer, who have more experience? We're not asking them, David interrupted. We're asking you, because you understand something they don't. You understand that employees aren't resources to be managed. They're people with complex lives, dreams, struggles, and potential. You lead with that understanding, and that makes all the difference. Aisha felt tears welling up. I'm scared. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? Then you'll learn and grow, just like you have been, David said gently. Aisha, I believed in you when you were a custodian fighting to keep your job. I believe in you now as someone capable of shaping the future of this entire organization. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Aisha thought of Maya, now 5 years old, thriving in kindergarten, full of confidence and joy. She thought of Teresa Gonzalez and all the other single mothers who needed someone in power who understood their lives. She thought of her own mother, who had died believing her daughter's future was ruined, who would never know that Aisha had built something beautiful from the ashes of teenage pregnancy and poverty. I'll do it, she said quietly. But I need 2 conditions. Name them. First, I finish my degree. I want to earn my education, even if it's not technically required. Second, I want the freedom to keep pushing for change, even when it's uncomfortable or expensive. No getting soft because I'm in the C-suite now. David laughed. Deal, though I suspect you'd push for change no matter what title you held. It's who you are. That evening, Alicia picked up Maya from the after-school program and took her to their favorite diner, not the chain restaurant where Aisha used to work, but a small family-owned place that Maya loved for its pancakes. Mama, why are you so happy today? Maya asked, drowning her pancakes in syrup. Because I got a new job, sweetheart. A very important job where I can help a lot of people. Are you going to help people like Mrs. Teresa? Her mama works at your building too. Alicia smiled. Of course, Maya had befriended Teresa's daughter at the daycare. Yes, exactly like Mrs. Teresa, and lots of other mamas and papas who work hard and need support. That's good, Maya said seriously, because some people need help, and some people can give help. You're good at giving help, Mama. Out of the mouths of babes, Alicia thought. Where did you learn that? Mrs. Patterson told me. She said your mama couldn't help you because she went to heaven, but now you can help other people the way you wish someone helped you. Alicia's throat tightened. Mrs. Wilder's throat tightened. Patterson is very wise. After dinner, they walked to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. The elderly woman opened the door with her usual warm smile, her face lighting up when she saw Maya. There's my favorite girl, come give me a hug. After Maya ran inside to play with Mrs. Bruve, Patterson's collection of ceramic figurines, Aisha sat down with the woman who had been her anchor through the darkest times. I have news, Aisha said. They offered me a CSU position, Chief People Officer. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, Aisha said, taking the older woman's weathered hand. When I had nobody, you were there. You watched Maya, you encouraged me, you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I just saw what was already there, Mrs. Patterson said. You were always special, Aisha. You just needed a chance to show it. I want to do something for you, Aisha said. Let me pay for someone to help you with your shopping, your cleaning, whatever you need. Please, it's the least I can do. Mrs. Patterson squeezed her hand. You know what I need? I need you and Maya to keep visiting. I need to watch you both thrive. That's payment enough for this old lady. But Aisha was already planning. Mrs. Patterson had given her so much. It was time to give back. 2 weeks later, at the official announcement of her promotion, Aisha stood before the entire company in the main auditorium. David had insisted on making it a celebration, inviting employees from every level and department. I'm not going to pretend I got here through a traditional path, Alicia began, her voice steady. 2 years ago, I was a custodial worker, barely making ends meet, terrified I was going to lose my job and my ability to care for my daughter. I was invisible, and I was failed by systems that should have supported me. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But then something happened. Someone saw me. Someone chose to believe that my voice mattered, that my experience had value, that I deserved a chance to grow. That person was David Chen, and his decision to invest in one struggling single mother set off a chain reaction that changed hundreds of lives. My job as Chief People Officer isn't to be grateful and quiet, is to be loud and persistent about making this company a place where everyone, regardless of their title, their background, or their struggles, is treated with dignity and given opportunities to thrive. We've made progress, but we have so much further to go. And I promise you, I will never forget what it feels like to be the person cleaning the floors at midnight, wondering if anyone sees them or cares. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, employees approached Aisha to congratulate her, share their stories, and thank her for giving them hope. Teresa Gonzalez was among them, her daughter Sophia holding her hand. I enrolled in the GED program, Teresa said shyly, because you told me I could, because you showed me it was possible. Aisha hugged her. You're going to do amazing things, Teresa. I know it. As the celebration wound down and people began to leave, David approached Aisha with a small, wrapped box. What's this? She asked. Open it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with words. She believed she could, so she did. My mother wore a bracelet like this, David said quietly. It was cheap costume jewelry, but she never took it off. After she passed away last year, I had one made for you. Because you remind me of her in all the best ways. Strong, resilient, fighting for a better life, no matter how hard the road gets. Aisha's vision blurred with tears. I'm sorry about your mother, David. I wish I could have met her. She would have loved you, David said, and she would have been proud that her son finally understood what she tried to teach him all those years ago. The measure of success isn't how much wealth you accumulate. It's how many lives you touch, how many people you lift up, how much good you create in the world. As Alicia drove home that night, Maya asleep in the back seat, she thought about the impossible journey that had brought her here. From teenage pregnancy and poverty, through desperate nights scrubbing floors, to the terror of losing everything, to the gradual climb to stability, and then to actual influence. The road had been brutal, but it had also been beautiful in its own way. Because every struggle had taught her something. Every failure had strengthened her. Every moment of desperation had clarified what truly mattered. She pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building, the same building where David had knocked on her door with a check and a chance. She carried Maya upstairs and tucked her into bed, then stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep. We made it, baby, Aisha whispered. We really made it. But even as she said it, she knew the work wasn't finished. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new employees who needed support, new systems that needed changing. The difference was that now she had the power, the platform, and the purpose to make those changes happen. She thought of all the young mothers out there, scrubbing floors, working multiple jobs, counting their last few dollars, wondering if they would ever be more than invisible. She couldn't save them all, but she could build systems that gave them chances. She could create pathways where before there were only walls. And maybe if she did her job well, the next 19-year-old single mother who walks through Platinum Enterprises doors wouldn't have to fight as hard as Aisha had. Maybe she could walk in knowing that her humanity mattered, that her struggles would be met with support instead of punishment, that her potential would be recognized instead of ignored. That was the real victory. Not Alicia's personal success, though that mattered. The real victory was building a world where success like hers wasn't a miracle. It was a possibility accessible to everyone willing to work for it. As Alicia finally climbed into her own bed, exhausted but content, she thought of the scared girl who had stood in Mr. Hendrix's office, begging for mercy. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned that the greatest power in the world wasn't money or status. It was the power to see someone else's humanity when the world had taught them to be invisible. It was the power to offer a chance when everyone else offered judgment. It was the power to believe in potential when circumstances screamed impossibility. David had given her that power when she needed it most. And now, every single day, Aisha would pass it forward to someone else who needed to know that they mattered, that they had value, that their story didn't have to end in desperation. That was her purpose. That was her calling. And that was her promise. The journey had been impossible. But she had walked it anyway, and in doing so, she had proven that impossible was just another word for not yet. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to know that their struggles don't define their worth, that second chances are real, and that kindness still exists in this world. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, hope, and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people fighting for better lives. And remember, you have the power to be someone's David Chen. You have the power to see the invisible, to question unjust systems, and to offer chances where others see only problems. Use that power. The world needs more people willing to believe in others, especially when they've lost the ability to believe in themselves. Thank you for watching. May you always have the courage to lift others up, and may someone be there to lift you when you need it most.